simplifying that and talking high level on what the 2022 budget means for you. What impact will it have on property taxes? What service impacts will you see in 2022? And how we plan to make the most of your tax dollars. Strap in. We're in for a little longer ride this week on This Week Ahead. It never fails. Every year when I reference the city's budget, I get glazed eyes and uninterested stares. At the same time, I hear comments about waste, mismanagement, and living within your means. Those two things seem correlated, right? Municipal budgeting is not fun. It's complicated, it's boring, and it's very often misunderstood. This week ahead, my goal is to try to fix the latter, those misunderstandings that you may have. I'll try, but I doubt I can make the 2022 City of Minot budget sexy. What I probably can do is make it simpler, digestible, and relatable to your everyday life so that when the first hearing of the new budget comes around this week ahead, you have fewer misunderstandings and more meaningful feedback, questions, or concerns for your elected leaders as they try to pass a budget months in advance of when it is actually needed. This week ahead is all about your city's budget, your tax dollars, what you can expect it to look like, and when those dollars are being, and where those dollars are actually being put towards. This week ahead is when 2022 really begins, at least for local governments. We'll take this piece by piece. While trying to keep it at a high level, we're going to try this week ahead to avoid those glazed eyes and those uninterested stares. Now, to do that, we have to talk about a common phrase that you will hear throughout every budget conversation. You hear the term mill levy. It's not short for million. That's what people oftentimes assume. To put it simply, a mill levy is the property tax applied based on the assessed value of the property. Okay. We'll work through this together. It's a ratio of the total value of properties in the city divided by the collective budgets of the taxing agencies. Okay, it's $1 per $1,000 of assessed value. The value changes every year with the change in budgets and valuations. Without getting overly complicated, if you read the term mill or you hear the term mill today going forward, that value of a mill is about $214,000. It can be terribly confusing. We do it because it gives us an apples to apples comparison to other governments. If you have more questions, well, don't at me because that's about as deep as my knowledge goes. Just know that mill is a comparative rate of the value of the properties, and the number of mills is based on how much money we're asking in our budgets. So when the city manager introduced the preliminary budget in August, it came with an increase of a little over 2 mills. That and an expected increase in property values created a slight increase in revenue. But that was just step one in the public process of municipal budgeting. It has now been a month since it was presented to the council, and the next step is here, the president's budget and message. The city council president takes the staff's preliminary budget and combs through it, approves, cuts, adjusts, tweaks ways that she deems appropriate. Just last week, Council President Lisa Olson released her recommendation. Instead of me trying to fumble through it and trying to explain her thoughts on the budget, let's bring her in to do that for us. Now, joining me now is City Council President Lisa Olson. Lisa, thanks for making time for us this morning.
Of course, good to be here.
Now, we'll get into your recommended budget in just a moment. First, when you walked into this process as Council President, what did you consider a top priority or top priorities for the community, and how did it align with the rest of the city council?
Well, I think prior to the whole budget process, the most important thing that the council did this year was to develop our Magic City aspirations. And the Magic City aspirations really are guiding us through this whole budget process. Now,
Lisa, you've had a month and change roughly to go through the preliminary budget when it was first presented to council. And that budget had, annual adjustments of just over $750,000 or roughly just over 2 mils. That includes construction on a 5th fire station in Northwest Minot, more work on flood control for Northeast Minot, major investments in the Minot International Airport storm sewer, a landfill transfer facility that could pave the way potentially for curbside recycling, council willing, and additional improvements to water, storm sewer, and wastewater infrastructure, as well as 18 new positions to city operations. That's a ton of things to consider and to balance from the council's point of view, I'm sure. Looking at your message now, it seems you made some adjustments. You took the 2.28 mils requested above 2021's budget, and you reduced that to just a slight increase of 0.2 mils, while still adding some of that additional help that the city staff has requested. Not all 18 positions, but a few of them. That gets to the burning question. As the sitting leader of the council as a whole, how did you make the decisions that you did, and what was cut from that preliminary budget?
Well, again, I went back to the aspirations. And so I looked at each position and I looked to see if it fit into one of the 4 categories. And if our listeners aren't aware of what the categories are, they're dynamic and prosperous, resilient and prepared, safe and welcoming, and excellent and connected. So when I looked at the positions, I tried to determine if they could fit into one, or better yet, even more of those categories. And if they did, it was a position that I would at least consider. And then I was trying to hold true to a few of the messages that the council had made public. One was they really wanted to hold the line on any increases, not only because we've seen some significant increases over the past few years, but because we had a lengthy conversation about being a good community partner to Minot Public Schools, and knowing that our efforts to hold the line may help them pass a bond vote for a second high school. So when I looked at all of that, then I made my recommendations to the positions that I felt were necessary for 2022. I guess I should add in there, I think that all 18 were necessary. I think that our staff did a nice job of presenting what they needed, but using the information that they gave us and the direction that the council seemed to be going to, I whittled it down to about 6 positions that would be funded through a property tax increase.
So I appreciate you bringing up Magic City aspirations. This is something public is going to be hearing a lot about here in the coming weeks. It is really as a body, it seems like this is your first initiative to where you're going to put these visions, these aspirations into use into this budget. So as the sitting council president, can you give us the elevator pitch for this version of the 2022 budget? Why should council pass it this coming week, and why should the public support this budget?
Well, it's a budget that reflects the needs of our community in 2022. We've gone through a lot in the last decade, but we can't focus necessarily on what happened in the past, but we need to look to the future. These aspirations are, quote unquote, our goalposts to reach. That's when we are most successful as a community, when we reach those aspirations. And I believe that the recommendations that I have brought to the council get us really close to that point. I think that we are taking care of the needs of a growing city. We just recently had our census results come out, and even though we were just shy of the 50,000 mark, we did see growth. And that's something that's really important to us. We want to see more growth. And when we have growth, you're going to have more financial needs. You're going to need more staff. So I believe that my recommendations reflect where we are and where we want to go.
In your message, you made reference to looking into the future and how difficult it really is. Experiencing just this last, in the last 18, 19 months or so, we've had almost an unpredictable impact to our current budget. You are one of our senior leaders on this council. You and Alderman Janser are sort of our longest serving incumbents. So you've been on council for a minute. You've done this process before. This might, correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, this is your first one as the council president, though, on the budget.
Actually, second.
Second. Okay.
Yeah.
How does
initiate this during a pandemic?
That's right. All right. Last year was just an absolute blur. I kind of forget about pieces of it.
Yeah.
But you've been part of this very complicated and difficult decision in the past. How do you feel this budget compares to the previous budgets you've been a part of?
Well, from my experience, and I'm going into year 12 on city council, this is probably the most public budget proposal. It's probably the most public recommendations from the council president. Early on, we wouldn't receive these recommendations until the night of the first reading. And now I have made this available about 3 weeks prior to the first reading of the budget, so that my colleagues on council have a time to consider it, but it's also been made public to the community. And so they're seeing what I feel is the important points of this budget, and it's giving them an opportunity for some feedback, whether it's prior to the first reading or certainly giving them that opportunity to come to the first reading of the budget on September 7th.
You made a cry too from the public just a couple weeks ago. When you had sort of a workshop with your council members. Did you get any feedback from the citizens that you're looking for?
I got a little bit, not a lot. I'd certainly like to hear more, because we are a representative government and we need to know what the residents are thinking, what fits their needs. I think that we can all agree that no one likes taxes. I don't like taxes any more than anyone else does. But we know that it is how we fund the services that we provide to the citizens of Minot. So we need to know what services they want and what is the threshold for the amount of money that they will pay for those services. And the question that I asked in our recent workshop was, what's more important? Is it more important to hold the line, or is it more important to see some of these services that made available to the citizens of Minot?
Any parting words for us in advance of Tuesday's first reading of this budget?
Well, my goal in all of this is to create a balance. I think that in a balanced society, we are doing what most people need. It's not dramatic on either side. It's kind of right in the middle. And I think that that's what keeps people satisfied. So I'm hopeful that my letter is balanced and that ultimately the decision that the council makes is also balanced.
All right. Thank you very much, Lisa. Of course, you can read the president's message online at minotnd.org. It's also going to be in your agenda packet for the upcoming council meeting. Thank you for taking some time for us this morning, Lisa. Once again, I very much appreciate your time.
Thank you, Derek.
Yeah, that's Council President Lisa Olson on her president's budget message to council. That will come up on Tuesday, September 7th at the first reading of the budget during the city council meeting. You can watch that, of course, live at City Hall, on Facebook, YouTube, and Public Access Channel 19. Thanks again, Lisa. Enjoy the extended weekend as well.
Thank you.
Now, on Tuesday's agenda, the council will be asked to approve the staff's budget. Alderwoman Olson, as you just heard from there, will likely make her case on those ideas. A public hearing will be available for anyone who has thoughts on this budget. Council members will have independent thoughts of their own as well. At least that's what most of us anticipate. This step is like the second draft up for review. In my experience, this is when some of the misunderstandings bleed through from the public side. Some may protest the fact that this budget is $175.9 million, a 22% increase from the last year. Sometimes people see that increase and just assume we're increasing taxes, 22%. It's not the case. Not at all, actually, which leads me sort of to my next point. And that is, within your budget, you have many tiny little budgets, but they can be separated into two types of funds: general fund and enterprise fund. The general fund is what property taxes go into. This is typically the general government in operation stuff like streets, police, and fire. And of course, your personal favorite, public information. The enterprise fund is services that you pay for monthly, rates and fees like your sanitation or your water bills. Both funds go into that $175.9 million. Much of the 2022 budget is not new money. It's money we have been saving for a very specific purpose, like flood control, NAWS. By law, we need to budget that money to spend it. The budget is not what you will be taxed for this year. So what will be coming from your property taxes within that $175.9 million? Well, it looks like this. $26.5 million of that is property tax levy in this budget, which is 15% of the entire budget. This is often the most misunderstood piece to this entire puzzle. Now, what does this all really mean for you? Well, if council passes the current preliminary budget, it would bring a slight increase to property taxes to the tune of just over $10 a year per $100,000 of valuation. So if you have a $200,000 home, you're looking at, roughly $20 or so. But it also means we start to work on a ton of projects that many in the community have wanted for years. Now let's talk big picture with our big picture guy, the chief executive of the city of Minot, the fearless leader, my boss, city manager Harold Stewart. Good morning, Harold.
Good morning.
For the record, I had like a ton of nice things listed to say about you still as my boss, but I'm getting a little long in the tooth this morning here, so we'll have to revisit some of those things later. But trust me, they're all very, very nice words and compliments.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Now the 2022 budget, Harold, really your first stamp on the city of Minot as city manager. Keeping it high level for us, what can we expect to get out of our local government in the next year if this budget is passed as recommended? What's the return on investment for us?
Well, we've tried to make a lot of progress when it comes to public safety issues, infrastructure maintenance issues, replacement issues, additional infrastructure. We're also trying to make sure that we keep the wages and benefits of our employees competitive. That's something that council staff and community invested a lot of effort and money into over the last several years. So we're trying to keep up with that as well. And then also just trying to make sure that we have the capacity we need to deliver the services that the citizens of Minot expect coming forward. And so doing kind of an organizational assessment of how well are we providing that? Do we have enough staff and resources to meet those expectations or not? And trying to balance all that, as well as also the general overall community needs. We've talked a lot over the meetings here over the last several months about the need for a second high school in Minot and what our role is in that, being one of the big agencies that has the ability and the authority to collect property tax, and making sure that there's room and capacity for our citizens to do that, bearing in mind that it's a tough financial time for all of our citizens as well, and even though costs of everything are going up, there's only so much that we can reasonably ask and expect our taxpayers to pay to balance all of that, and we're a piece of that. And just bearing in mind that we are a piece of that. And we need to, it's our job and leadership to make sure that's balanced in a way that's sustainable for us as an organization, but also for our citizens to live a quality life within our community.
So let me ask you this. What's the bottom line to the budget? How did we make the decisions that we did as a staff? There's a lot left on the cutting room floor before it was even presented to council.
Right.
What and how and why did we land on what we did within this document that council is being asked to approve on Tuesday?
As I just mentioned, there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to a budget. It sounds simple, and I can give you the simple answer that, the simple way of handling a budget is know how much money you have coming in and don't spend more money than you have coming in. So it's balancing expenses to what your revenues are. but there's a lot of moving parts in there, just like as I talked about. There's needs of the organization, there's needs of the community, there's infrastructure needs, both new and maintaining current ones or replacing current infrastructure. You're trying to balance all of that. And so, we're trying to do things that as we're out interacting with the public, that we're hearing and identifying our significant issues and priorities and trying to make sure that gets built in the budget. And we're also trying to take care of the internal needs of the organization and our employees, because at the end of the day, we're an employer and we have to recruit people to come work for us just like anybody else does. And we have to provide a good environment and competitive wages and benefits in order to have the staff on hand that we need to provide the services that the community has entrusted us to provide. So we're trying to balance all of that. So this budget was really about how do we balance all of that and have it done in a way that's progressive, that's moving the community forward in a very positive way, but is also in a very fiscally responsible way going forward. And that's been the challenge this year. Revenues are flat. We're in the middle of COVID. Well, I don't know if we're in the middle. We've been dealing with COVID for 18 months. That's had
hopefully at the end, right?
Yeah, hopefully. But that has a significant economic impact. The Canadian borders are closed. We haven't had our northern neighbors coming down to visit with us and open their wallets here in our community here for 12 to 18 months now at this point, which is a significant economic component of our community and our region. And through all that, I think Mina has shown its sustainability and its resiliency through this period, and the fact that our revenues have remained fairly stable. They haven't grown a whole lot, but they remain fairly stable. And I think that's a huge positive. But when it comes to the budget, we're not building in a big expectation of a big increase in sales tax revenues because the data and the indicators show that that's not happening right now, and it's probably not going to happen for a little while longer yet. So, but at the same time, we have costs going up for everything. We have construction projects where it hit the same with some of these COVID impacts with limited labor and materials and those types of things. And it's the law of supply and demand. When there's low supply and high demand, the cost of everything goes up, and we get hit by that as well. So we're still trying to keep projects on track, like NAWS and the new city hall downtown, building Fire Station 5, buying a new pumper truck to go into that station, which you have to order 12 to 18 months in advance. We have flood mitigation that we're working on to improve the safety of our community and minimize the risk of that for future generations that we're making progress on. And then at the same time, we're trying to keep our wages competitive. One of those benefits we provide is health insurance for our employees. We saw a 28% increase in health insurance this year. So that's a substantial cost increase this year that we're trying to figure out how we meet that. And then at the same time, we've been doing a lot with a little with our staff, and we're getting to a point where that's no longer sustainable. And so we've had, here most recently, the conversations with the council and the staff have been to add some new positions, and how many and what should be added. And I guess the process we go through on that, and there's differences of processes. Each of the department heads probably have a difference of opinion. Each of the council members have a difference of opinion. I have a difference of opinion as far as what is a priority and those types of things. And that's all good. I encourage those differences of opinion. That's how we make good decisions for the community and look at all perspectives and balance all of that out. Of course, I have the fortune that I get to present a city manager's recommended budget, which includes input from the staff and the department heads and management team. And overall, my approach to this year is what is going to provide better services to the community and provide a better quality of life and a safer community for our community going forward. So in my recommended budget, and this is aside from the preliminary budget that was presented at the very beginning that included the 18 positions, what I'm recommending be included as part of the mill levy funded positions would be 2 dispatchers. Our dispatch service is a bit overwhelmed right now. We have a lot of volume coming in and not quite enough people to handle that. And for me, that's a big public safety concern. And they're right at the heart and the first contact when it comes to an emergency situation. So we don't want a bottleneck there We want to be able to respond to those calls as quickly as we can at the dispatch center. So that's a very important element, in my opinion, on the public safety side. And so I've recommended adding 2 new dispatch positions there. And then when we move down to community development, unfortunately, we've had a lot of growth within our community, and we continue to anticipate significant more growth based off of conversations that we're having with developers and investors that are looking at projects throughout our community. So I don't see that slowing down at any time in the future. And we're a little bit understaffed on the plumbing inspection side. So there has been a request this year for a new plumbing inspector. And so that's included in my recommendation this year to help us continue to get those inspections done, not slow down growth, not slow down progress, get those inspections done so construction can continue and those buildings can be built and opened and available to our community as quickly as possible. And then the other piece would be 2 new bus drivers. So as we've analyzed and looked at how we're meeting bus service needs throughout our community, we have a couple of areas that we're just not real strong at right now, or that we're not meeting the potential demand yet. And that would be the northwest and the southwest sides of the community with some of the growth that's happening in those areas. And the benefit too with the bus drivers is 50% of that we get federal funding to provide public transit. And so the city doesn't bear the entire cost of that. And same with dispatchers. We have an agreement with Ward County. They cover 35% and the city covers 65%. So a lot of my recommendations and decisions were how do we get the biggest bang for the buck for the taxpayers? And when you have additional monies coming in to support these positions, that's not, you get the full service benefit from those, but we're not paying 100% of the cost. So in my mind, those took priority in my recommendations to the council. And so increasing safety with dispatch, adding a couple of new bus routes that serve the southwest and the northwest sides of town with the new school in the northwest and potential of a new high school in the northwest, and then also the new hospital in the southwest and the development that continues to go and be driven there. We anticipate continued needs for ridership to those areas. And so I think those bus driver positions make sense. So that's kind of my 2 cents on how we go through that budget process and where I stand with my recommendations to the council and to the community. But ultimately, and again, like I said, there's multiple different opinions with regards to that. We all have a piece to play in this process. And ultimately, the council and the community have final decision on that. And I think that's great. And I know that the council is doing their best effort to be very diligent on this and make sure that they're very informed on these decisions and making the decisions they really feel are in the best interest of the community. And I've been impressed as the council has worked through this year. They are cognizant of their role as a governing body for this community, and they've been elected to represent the community and make these decisions, and they understand the concerns with the burden of property tax and how we can provide services in a more efficient, effective way and try to minimize that burden as much as they can, but also being cognizant and bearing in mind the role that they play within the community as one of multiple community leaders and community needs, and understanding the positive impact that a second high school will have on this community in growth and in quality of life, and understanding that need, and that perhaps maybe that is one of the higher needs within our community at this time. Obviously, I believe there's probably a variety of opinions with regards to that through the citizenry of the community. But from our perspective, as we look at the future of Minot, that's an issue that is of utmost importance and high priority, both for the city and the school district. And I guess we'll see whether that priority matches with the public at some point when that's on a ballot issue in the future.
You unloaded a lot of information about the recommended budget there, and I want to reiterate something that you said. This is a recommendation. Everything we talked about, everything you discussed, your rationale for the budget, it could all change come Tuesday night. It could be adopted in fully the way it's written, but it can change. It's up to the discretion of the council, and ultimately, it's a first reading or a first hearing. So it's the public's input still warranted in this spot.
Right, and I want to restate something that I stated at the special council meeting. I mean, we've been focusing a lot on whether or not the mill levy should increase or not increase, and what positions should be in and what positions shouldn't be in. Are we cutting, are we not cutting, those types of things. But at the end of the day, if you look at this budget comprehensively, there's a lot of positive progress in this budget. We're making progress on NAWS that this community has been working on for almost 2 decades now. We're making a lot of significant progress on flood mitigation. We're making a lot of progress on road maintenance in this budget. We're including a 5th fire station, which increases public safety. And ultimately will have an impact on ISO ratings, which means that hopefully homeowners insurance and business insurance is less out of pocket for our citizens. We're maintaining competitive wages for our employees. We're maintaining good benefits for our employees. And at the end of all of that, even with revenue still being flat, at the end of all of that, we still have a little bit of room left to potentially add some help into our organization to continue to provide better services to our community. And so there's a lot of positive in this budget, and I don't want that to get lost here right before we cross the finish line as we're discussing the final pieces that are in or out of the budget. So overall, comprehensively, this is a great budget. Staff has done a good job. Council's done a great job. We've had several citizens providing their input to council members. And that's been a great addition as well. And overall, I think we're gonna have a great budget that's gonna set the foundation for us here for the next 12 to 18 months as we try to move this organization and this community forward in a meaningful and a positive way. That Minot continues to be a strong community that provides a great quality of life and a place that's safe for people to be here and call home.
I got one more question for you, Harold, and it's about the challenges. So you mentioned some of these things. One thing that I always find really impressive going through this process as a staff member, we look to our finance staff, they start this process in April. That is almost a full year before a budget's actually passed. So you have to project and foresee things that are unforeseeable, like global pandemics and how that impacts your revenues. The growth that we've seen specifically in Southwest Minot, we have to try to predict the future in this. That's one challenge, that obviously. And then another one are these big projects. We're going through 2 generational projects with NAWS and flood control, and we kind of have to build a budget around how we spend there. From your perspective, as the chief executive, as the city manager, what challenges did this budget and potentially future budgets, what challenges are we presented with, and how are you going to navigate through those?
Well, I think the big challenge we have is obviously culturally here in North Dakota, as you're seeing conversations at the state level about eliminating property tax and those types of things. The message that comes very clear is we're at a point now where we can't keep coming to the well, so to speak, and asking for higher property tax for our community. I think Minot has done a good job over the last several years, and I think it was important decisions and difficult decisions in recent years where the mill levy has increased significantly. And I understand the reasoning for that, especially when you're taking on projects like NAWS and flood mitigation. You're right; those are generational projects, and either of those projects just alone by itself is a big undertaking for any community, and then a community to handle both of those simultaneously is extremely challenging and difficult. So, but Minot, I think, has handled it well. But I think, back to my point though, is I think it's very evident that we need to provide some relief to our citizenry. And so if we can either keep that mill levy flat or in some cases decrease it, I think it behooves us as community leadership to give that strong consideration, which we have through this budget. But ultimately, I think what that means is, as I mentioned earlier, our cost of operation continues to go up every year, right? Our utility bills go up, costs for materials, our costs for chlorine or lime to treat water goes up every year. Those types of things. We're in that sense, we're like a business. Our costs of employees goes up every year, and so that means we have to figure out how to increase revenue in order to meet those needs if we're going to continue to provide the service, or identify services that we just can't afford to do anymore and eliminate, which is difficult in a government setting to do that, because often we provide services that a large number of our constituency expects and wants us to provide. And so I think the issue with that is we need to continue to grow. We need to grow both population-wise, but we also need to grow economically. This is one of the reasons why I've done several presentations to the council and have pushed for more focus on economic development, especially on the retail side of the equation when it comes to economic development. We need to see sales tax growth go forward. And we need to become a stronger regional hub for healthcare and for retail and for business, where people are coming from outside our community to spend money. And we need to provide more opportunities so that less of our local citizenry are going to other communities to spend money. Because the more money of that we can keep here local, the more we can recycle into improvements within our community. When you go to Bismarck and go shopping and eat at their restaurants, you pay their sales tax. You're helping pay for their police department. You're helping pay for their fire department. You're helping pay for their roads. And I'm not saying we should never do that, but if we do that consistently over time, we're using our money to help make Bismarck better. And so how do we create the opportunity that we can meet those needs here locally, that when you go out and enjoy that and spend that money, that helps you make your community here at home better? And then how do we kind of flip the script, so to speak, so that people come to Minot to spend that money? So hopefully people from Bismarck or Mandan or wherever else are coming here and spending money and helping make Minot better and stronger. And so that's why we have, the recent retail services contract to help us do that data analysis, help recruit business in, to help drive that sales tax, because we need that revenue growth to support the organization going forward, but do it in a way that we're not pushing that need onto the mill levy or the property tax that comes out of the pockets of our property owners throughout the community. So we're playing this balance through all this, but I think that's the biggest challenge is how do we continue to grow revenues in some way that does not become overly burdensome for our local citizens going forward, I think is a big challenge. And I think we're coming to the end of NAWS. We anticipate that the city will meet its commitment funding wise here within the next 3 years or so. So that financial commitment is hopefully there's light at the end of the tunnel for that. We continue to work with the state legislature on the flood mitigation issues. Right now, that's on a 20-year plan to complete. We're hoping to, shorten that time frame a little bit, but that's going to take the partnership from the state to be able to help do that. We're going to continue to have need for roads and replacement of water mains and sewer mains and all those types of things within our community. A lot of that infrastructure was built a long time ago and is coming to the end of its life cycle. And so as much as we try to do preventative maintenance, you can only do that for so long before it finally just fails because it's met the end of its life cycle. And a lot of that comes with a significant cost. And when a lot of that was put in, there was a lot of federal programs to help pay for that. And those federal programs aren't there to help replace it. And so that burden comes back to us locally on how to do that. So how do you balance all that and still create a place that's safe, that's has a good quality of life, and it's affordable for people to live? And so I think those are the biggest challenges: is continuing to grow in a sustainable way, in a planned way, and then continue to grow revenues that we can continue to make investments into quality of life and to adapt to future needs and wants of the community going forward.
Yeah, we got our work cut out ahead of us, but like you said, NAS flood control, if we can shorten that timeline on flood control, this process may make it a little easier for us in the short future or near future, I guess. Anything else about this budget that will be weighed on Tuesday by our council and the following meetings throughout the month of September?
Just that September is an important month, and I hope that the public is watching and listening and providing input. Again, like you said before, we're trying to use our crystal balls and make educated guesses on what's going to happen here over the next 12 to 18 months, which has a challenge in and of itself. But we're really setting the groundwork for that right now with the decisions we're making with the budget. And so now is a very important, crucial time for the public to come and voice their opinions on that. If you wait until October or November, or when we start putting into practice the decisions we're making in the budget now, not to say that things can't change at that point, but it's further in the process. It's more difficult to do that and has bigger consequences when we do that. And so it's easier and better to have that conversation now. So, if you have a strong opinion about whether the staff we need to add more staff, or it's more important to decrease property tax and those types of things, now's the time to come and have conversations with the council and the staff as those get finalized in the budget. Because once we make the mill levy decision, that's going to be the mill levy for the next 12 months. And that one really effectively can't be changed given the legal processes that state law has outlined through that. So we can change what we spend money on or how it's spent, but we can't change the mill levy after that second council meeting here in September.
All right, Harold, thank you for your time this morning. I appreciate you taking some time and trying to give us a good big picture idea of where your head's at as we look towards 2022 already. I mean, we just turned the calendar to September, but 2022 is here before we know it. Thanks for your time this morning, Harold. We'll see you Tuesday. Enjoy the rest of your long weekend.
You too. Look forward to Tuesday.
All right. Thanks, Harold. That's the city manager, Harold Stewart, on the 2022 budget and what you can expect in 2022 if this budget is indeed passed by council. We'll find out, of course, on that Tuesday night. Now, we're in the final steps of finalizing a budget. We, as a city, have tried to make sure this process was as public as possible, that you had as many touch points as possible, that questions were answered and information was provided. This is one of those efforts, right? The budget currently in front of council is as high as that number can go. By state law, we cannot increase the preliminary budget. It can, however, decrease. Tuesday, September 7, is your chance to weigh in to council on this budget. A motion to adopt some version will be made, and the next step will be a second hearing, a finalization to the final draft. After that, the budget will be adopted and we'll be looking towards 2022. The second reading and final adoption will be September 20th. Here's one last reminder to ask me or your council or our staff any questions that you may have. Of course, you can send that to mindednd.org/public comments to contact council, mindednd.org/mailbag. That will get to me. Well, I want to make one quick note on construction before I let you go for this week ahead. To be brief, there'll be traffic impacts. Similar to what you've seen, we should have wrapped up our street ceiling, but Burdick will see ADA ramps essentially on the south side of Burdick. Big long stretch. The whole project goes from 16th Street Southwest to 27th Southeast. You will start to see a lot of concrete work on those ramps coming up this week ahead. Most of that will be first off concentrated around that downtown area, and that's where a lot of that work will be. Also, Monday is Labor Day, so don't forget that city services and offices will be closed up for the holiday. That means no public transit, no sanitation collection. The library will be closed. Of course, if you have emergencies for water, for example, water breaks or something like that, you want to call our hotline, 852-0111. Everything will be back up and running on Tuesday, September 7th. Mark your calendars as well for later this month because we have cleanup week coming, September 20 to the 24th. Double check your collection date for fall cleanup. Household hazardous waste will be that weekend as well, that Friday and Saturday, 24th, 25th. And of course, I would like to remind you to like and subscribe all of our channels on social media. We're at City of Minot. Tell your friends about our newsletter. Sign up at minotnd.org/the latest. And of course, finally, enjoy your week ahead.